kicked off this conversation this morning, having an amazing discussion about how to support and what the role is for both teachers, consultants, board, and students as we design these new learning environments. And so Vince has done an amazing job sharing what's up with CSV Amond, which is wicked to hear. And so the conversation has already started rolling. I haven't even gotten my second cup of coffee yet, and we're off to the races. So please jump in, Peter, and maybe if you wouldn't mind just doing a little intro about who you are, a little background of yourselves, and then let's get this conversation continuing.
Go ahead.
Age before beauty.
Mm-hmm. That's you then, eh? No.
Young age. And beauty. Okay, go for
it. My name's Brenda Sherry. I'm coming in from Guelph, Ontario, and I recently transitioned from a former role in Upper Grand District School Board, so where I was 20 years as a classroom teacher, mostly elementary, and about half of my year special education, and then 6 years as a technology coach for the board, the first one that they had actually, so that was fun. That job actually evolved through the funding for the equipment that students got with learning disabilities. That's how I met Dustin through the work he was doing there, and then Martha later. Right, so we were doing a lot of that training.
Residence coffee maker right there.
Yeah, exactly. And then I had a couple of years, I would say 2 years as a vice principal and 3 years as a education officer with the ministry. Now I've transformed into, I say I'm rewired, not retired. So I'm working with advanced learning partnerships with Dell and with Taking It Global and having a good time. So I've gone through a little transitioning to working from home. So it hasn't been a huge shock for me. But I know it's a transition for sure, and now it's completely different in terms of working from home. It's home all the time. So that's who I am.
There's no office hours, and that's part of the problem, right? We just walk away from the table for a bit, then come back, and it's not like you shut down at 4 o'clock and punch your card and away you go.
Right. It's easy to spend your entire day. Mm-hmm. I agree, Vince.
Mm-hmm. And hi. Brenda only covers some of the stuff that she's done actually, so I'm going to point out some other things along the way that were really outside the job descriptions related to sort of all the online stuff that we got involved with. My name's Peter Skillen. I started teaching.
Where did you two meet, just out of curiosity?
At an ECHO conference.
Really?
I attended one of his sessions, and I didn't know that there was this anti-standards movement. Okay, I'm kind of anti-standards. It was around the time of EQAO and all that. And he did an anti-standards session that I went to, and that just started some learning. And then we started to work together, and I was introduced to Logo, like maybe 2003 or 4 or something like that. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so we hit it off, and lots of great ideas, similar ideas, and you should do presentations, says I. Oh, I could never stand in front of a group of people and talk, she says to me. Wow.
Still stresses me out.
Yeah, it stresses me out too. So I started teaching in 1970, actually. So this is my 50th year of education as a teacher. Yeah, crazy. So I taught elementary school, and in 1977, I was finishing my last course for my master's in psych.
They were graduating people at 14?
Who knew, eh?
All right.
That's like the...
I wish I were that bright. And so in 1977, finishing that master's thing, and Ron Ragsdale at OISE was running this thing called Computers in Education, Computers in the Classroom. So I went and took, and not thinking I would like it much because it was kind of a humanist in the 70s and all that, and didn't, it was kind of a mechanistic thing to me at that point. Until I took a dumb terminal into my classroom, my grade 1 classroom, hooked it up via telephone line to the library's phone, and had kids program in BASIC, grade 1s. And obviously the programming was kind of like print Janine 10 times. But when I saw those little kids in this tough neighborhood squaring their shoulders and raising their heads and so forth, it really changed my perspective and really brought me into the world of Seymour Papert, whom I was fortunate to hang with on occasion, and really helped me understand my roots in Piaget and constructionism and student agency and construction of knowledge and all that kind of stuff. Then in 1982, North York School District started a computers and education center. So I moved from the classroom to that instructional leader kind of role and ran their professional learning till about 2000 when I retired for the first time. Then I went and worked at Logo Computer Systems Incorporated, the Seymour Papert's company that produces Logo and now produces Lynx, which is what we're using in our work with TakingItGlobal. Mm-hmm. And in 2003, stopped that, and the YMCA started a secondary school. The YMCA of Greater Toronto started a secondary school to serve kids who were disengaged from learning, was the description at the time. So I went in there with my ideals around project-based learning and all that kind of stuff. And those kids taught me an awful lot about how naive I was. It was a humbling and energizing experience. All during that time, when Brenda and I met, we started doing online work with Cheryl Nussbaum Beach for Powerful Learning Practice, and we started working with OTF. We started up OTF Connects, which is was their online course scenario. Brenda led us into designing and writing a course for TV Ontario, for Teach Ontario, around, I can never remember the name of the course, but it was sort of best practices around
facilitation in online spaces, strangely enough. Mm-hmm. Very, very appropriate today. Topical. Yes, topical. Yeah. We'll be revisiting it, let's just say.
Yeah, so, yeah, and then of course ECHO we've been involved with for years, and then it changed to the BIT conference and OTF's Pedagogy Before Technology conferences and stuff like that. And we've always been very fortunate to be able to craft things with a heart and soul and pedagogy that we have liked. We're excited to bring this stuff now in this current crisis and looking at it optimistically to try and get things going the way we advocate and the way we say. Sometimes I hear a lot of words around agency, but agency doesn't just mean giving kids the choice between reading that or reading this. Agency requires really students to be epistemologists in a sense, right? Understand their learning, understand how learning occurs, and all that kind of stuff. It's not just about giving them power. It's about enabling them with the tools and the cognitive tools to have that power and exercise that power. Okay, I'm off track.
Actually, you're right on point, because that's when I meeting both of you. It was at a OTF conference, and Garfield Ginny Newman was doing a 2-day workshop, and he was talking about critical thinking and the skills that our students obviously require when it comes to deep learning. And Dustin and Garfield had partnered because he was using an interactive whiteboard, and he's like, I do not just want to use this as a display screen. I want to use it as integral to my demonstration of technology tools for thinking. And so I remember being at the back room and you two buzzing around like you do in every room I've ever seen you in, with the group, chatting with everybody, and that's where I remember meeting you. And then I was just well,
empowering through agency. I say this, I think, every time when I reflect on that moment, and just the welcoming when we started. I think it might have been one of the first conferences that we participated in as Fair Chance Learning, where we were part of that instruction, or part of the opportunity to be facilitating with the individual there, and just the open-armed nature of and welcoming and feeling that, yes, you're relevant here. Yes, we believe you can make a difference, and just an awesome moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned a lot from Garfield and his use of that whiteboard. Like I remember, well, because we were translating a lot of his strategies and that he used through his critical thinking presentations and work with kids into visual representations on the whiteboard, like ranking. We were doing that strategy and a few other ones. I'd have to kind of think about it for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, and what was so funny is that, I mean, his presentations, he had a slide deck that was like 120 slides, and he kind of said to Dustin, now let's make this, pop. And Dustin, I was like, I would never do that.
It was a moment. You talk about your mind at the end of the day. I would have his time for maybe 30 minutes or maybe an hour, and I couldn't keep up with the amount of frames that were open on his computer because it would go back and forth. But I think the core concepts and the invitation to believe in what the approach was, and then visually and technically try to support that in an engaging way. There was an opportunity for that, but yes. So that was good.
It kind of felt like they were dating that time period. They were chatting so much, and they get so their conversations were so back and forth. I was like, okay, I'll just leave you two over there. And
finishing each other's sentences and all that.
Yeah, with big smiles on their faces. It was a good time, though. Obviously, when you think of flow of learning, that was the flow of learning for them. But with respect to how we started this conversation with you, Vince, I would love to hear everybody's kind of perspective of how in this, you said, Peter, we are in a crisis mode. How can we be reflective in this mode to make the decisions that we've kind of committed to prior to this, massive situation, and I love the rewiring instead of retirement, and I think that's how I'll introduce Barb every time, because she's like, I'm a retired teacher. I'm like, you can't call yourself a retired teacher if you're always continuing to teach and learn, and so rewired is the new phrase.
Or lifelong learner maybe too.
Or exhausted.
Or exhausted. Well, we can't go on holidays now, so.
I think we all can have that feeling for sure. But what was some of the work that you were doing, and even Vince, what are you proud of, the differences that you're seeing in terms of your district stepping up with different thinking strategies or opportunities for your student
in this situation?
Yeah.
I think it's seems like I call it the openness or willingness to adapt to the technology. Like Teams has always been there. Last year, my role was supporting schools in our Viamon 21 program, which was going to the schools, doing a day of co-planning and then a day of co-teaching with the teacher using the technology like Teams and other things. And it's always been there, but nobody had it. A need really to use it. Like it's like, okay, yeah, it's there, cool, but now we have to use it, right? And I think as part of the initiative that we were doing last year, I think it's like, okay, we've heard of this, it's not brand new, right? I got to go in a few minutes, sorry. And I got to run a session there, but yeah, and now it's there, and the teachers are getting on board, and the principals are having their staff meetings via Teams, and like I say, the teachers are coming into our open Teams meeting that's running all day long, and they could ask a question, and we walk them through it, and the feedback we're getting from the principals is like, wow, the teachers are collaborating amongst themselves now. The teachers are helping other teachers now, and it's like it's taking off. And I think it's going to cause a shift. And like what Ralph mentioned to me this morning, is it's just like after World War I, right? A whole bunch of innovative thinking had to be put into practice to win the war, basically. So a lot of different things. And now we're at war with this virus. So it requires us, it's forcing us to think differently to accomplish stuff. And it's happening. The teachers are upping their game. They're learning, and they're not saying, "Well, geez, I don't want to do this. I'm quitting." No, they're on board. they have a hunger for this, right? And knowing that they're in the same situation as us, everybody's on the same level, right? We're all in this together. And for some of the things that I'm exploring, it's kind of new to me. I know it existed, but I haven't had much opportunity to use it. But now I've got to coach teachers in using it. So, I'm exploring stuff like that. And let's have a little playground. I set up a playground teams, and we go in there, we play around and share screens and documents and stuff, and it's working, right? So I think it's elevating everybody's level of confidence in their own abilities as well. It's always been there, but they were afraid to explore. Now they're exploring. It's like, hey, I could do this, right? So now they're going to go ahead and do that, right? And there's a lot of discussion about other features that we can turn on. So I'm proposing, to IT that we turn on this feature and that feature, to allow the teachers to call the parents via VoIP instead of their own cell phone. There's nothing. Everybody knows that once you call a parent from your own cell number, you're going to get hounded like crazy. I learned that early in my career. So having the ability to call parents via Skype, for example, it's a whole different ballgame, right? There's that, that separation type of thing. And I've been an advocate of the use of technology for a long time. And, I would have wished that it would have been adopted by more people earlier on. But it is what it is, and we're working through it, right? Got excellent support from our superintendents and the director of education and our supervisors in the consultant department. It's really, really good. And like I say, nobody is negative about this, right? They realize that this is what we're in. It's just, okay, here's our new reality. Let's work with this, right? Instead of working against it. So hopefully things will get better, for sure. Can I build on? Oh, right. I apologize. I do have to go. I have to man the computer for my session right now. So if I'm done and you're still online, I'll join in again. But
okay, awesome. Thanks, Ben.
Great meeting you.
Great to get to know you a bit.
Yeah, thanks.
Sweet.
I just wanted to build on something maybe that he's saying that I've been reflecting on a lot. And that is when he was talking about how the collaboration that he's seeing and how everybody's working together, they're sort of thrown into it at the moment. When we were bringing out the competency document at the ministry, and the research behind that came from the National Research Council and OECD, I guess, and they were talking about the VUCA world, which is VUCA. So they talked about how we're in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, and how do teachers prepare students for that kind of a world. And so, we sort of give it lip service. Oh yeah, we need to be communicating. We need to be collaborating. We need to be innovative and creative. And one thing I reflect on right now is that we are there now. We got thrust into that experience of no one knowing, an adaptive challenge, right? No one knowing the answer, no one knowing the end, no one knowing how, no experience. Well, some experience around science and signposts of where we should go. But when I zoom out, I think about I think now we have, for some of us, especially North American teachers, it might be our first experience with a global disaster in this way. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's giving people new appreciation for that teaching for the future kind of experience. And then I was also listening to, who was it yesterday? Somebody was talking about, I think it might have been the PM actually, when he did his address, and he was talking, no, they were interviewing, before Justin Trudeau came on, they were interviewing a Montessori teacher, and she's had to shut down her business, and she's talking about trying to stay afloat until she can come back and be there for parents, because as the economy thaws, we're going to need these supports here. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, we're talking about experiential learning in schools, just like what Vince was talking about with co-op. Why are we not hearing more from students as untapped leaders in this whole process? Because when that is experiential learning. When the economy starts to thaw, we're going to need supports from people. And couldn't students be a part of that? And how many districts are involving students in their conversations right now about what they want school to look like? I hope we've changed, and I hope that's happening, but I think the adults are in shock a bit around what's been going on and are reverting a little bit back to like, let's do school to them instead of have them with them. That's just from a big, huge view of what's going on. And I don't, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it is the 30,000 view, but honestly, Brenda, when you connected with Tim King and when you connected with Kendra about, you know, our code to learn
kids in
at
there,
home scenarios, why don't you explain a piece of that? Because that brings it right down to, you know, to the starting point, not a starting point, but, you know, it's a small movement towards what you're talking about.
Peter and Brenda, just if you can share a little bit about Code to Learn, because I think some of us would know, and then some of us, I know we're living and breathing, and we do work together on some of that. But I think there's an opportunity to share the amazing work and where the program is.
Yeah, and I don't want to just keep talking. I don't want to just keep talking. So maybe you guys, what do you want to share about all that, or should we just talk about it?
I think just a general description of what it is, how it involves
Taking It Global.
Yeah, Taking It Global, the connection to Code to Learn, and kind of where you're seeing, like how you're responding currently based on the needs that you're exploring to fill here.
So I'll explain the Code to Learn piece, and Brenda could explain the Connected North and the Taking It Global piece, which is the umbrella of it, if that makes any sense, Brenda. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I'm also going to call on Jeff Hainbuck to talk about his experiences with Taking It Global as well at the district level.
Okay.
Now we're obviously moving towards the student, like the outreach level, but you know, as an organization, they're such an incredible organization. So Peter, Brenda, Jeff.
Sure,
Yeah.
happy to participate.
Yeah, so several years ago, the Canadian government initiated something called CAN Code, and offered $50 million out to not-for-profits to come up with plans to implement digital skills, mostly computational thinking, coding, or digital media creation to students and educators across Canada. And so at that point, Michael Quinn from Logo Computer Systems, the company I mentioned, was Seymour Papert's company. He's produced Logo, so he contacted me and asked if I wished to be involved with this to roll out the then version of Logo called Microworlds across Canada. He wanted to, you know, keep Seymour Papert's dream alive as sort of as a legacy project to give Microworlds to every student in Canada, and or every person in Canada. So. That was pretty exciting, so I couldn't really resist that. Then we needed a not-for-profit, and we both know Michael and Jennifer from Taking It Global, and so we reached out to them to see if he'd be interested, or they'd be interested in putting in a proposal. And we got the grant the first time round, and FCL came on as partner at that time, and then now we're in our second round of doing that, so we have an online cloud-based version of Logo now called Links. That's in Canadian English, Canadian French, and currently in Ojibwe as well, and Anishinaabe, and we're looking to other Indigenous languages too. So I'll let Brenda explain maybe Create to Learn and then Taking It Global a bit in the Connected North.
Okay, so Taking It Global just celebrated their 20th year, which is pretty exciting. Wow. And Jennifer Corriero and Michael Furtick are the co-founders. They graduated from university and really saw a need to begin an organization, a not-for-profit, that would empower youth around the world to make the world a better place. And they were youth themselves, of course, starting this, so that's pretty amazing. And I think I would say that they are pioneers in a lot of the global projects that we know today. So IRON was around, we were using those kinds of global projects, but they were kind of a new, more youth-oriented not-for-profit in that area. So they began, I would say, from my experience with their organization, international projects around kids in other areas, and then have really developed now a big focus on Canada, our Indigenous people, and just empowering youth across the country with various things. So I'm excited to be involved with Connected North, which is live interactive video conferencing in remote and Indigenous communities. So I have a school in Nunavut in Whale Cove that I'm connected with, and I'm their school coordinator there. And then the schools in the Yukon. And right now they're running a Connected North at Home. So that's a resource that people could share out for sure. I'll put that in the chat, or Peter could. And another one that really I get excited about, and I think would be great to know about for educators to know about, is Whose Land, which is an application or a website that they've created. And I find it a really awesome primary resource for teachers and students to understand all of the Indigenous communities across Turtle Island and in Australia as well. And they embed all kinds of really great videos and content in there that they've created through their Create to Learn program, which is giving storytellers the tools they need to tell digital stories about their land and where they come from. And so I use that all the time, that app, as I'm doing land acknowledgements or working with teachers around what it means to acknowledge the land and find out more. So it's a great research site. And then Rising Youth is also a really exciting program. They fund any kind of social innovation projects that youth 15 to 30 might want to be involved with. They don't have to be Indigenous, it could be non-Indigenous folks as well, but it's really student-led and supported by the Taking It Global team. So it's a really nice leadership project. Students can get $250, $750, or $1,500 depending on the scope of their project. So, you know, we were advocating that a lot of the experiential learning and the social justice classes could be accessing this funding as part of senior students' culminating projects. So I hope people are still looking into that and trying to think of what they might be thinking about doing in this era of self-isolation, and what could kids be doing as part of their school, as a part of their learning at home that might support their communities. Who knows? It's up to kids.
I love it, Brenda. It's so funny you talk about, you know, how we were having this conversation. I said, how many thousands, hundreds of thousands high school students are sitting at home right now with boundless energy,
right?
Creativity, the know-how of the technology to be collaborative. Like, they're hacking all of their social media platforms to get that connection.
Yes.
How can we tap in? And I think, you know, focusing it on their own communities is extremely powerful. And the willingness, like our son is 8, and this week he's decided that he's coming to work with us in the morning. We're in our own office, which is nice. There's, you know, obviously we can still continue to social distance, but he's up in the morning, he's dressed, and he's like, Mom, let's go. And he wants to come and participate in something, right? He wants to contribute. Yep. He wants that that connection. So I think you're right. How do we enable that? And Jeff, you know, it's a good time because you really focused on the student programming with Taking It Global in TDSB. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So thank you for the opportunity, Martha. My name's Jeff Hainbuck, and I had the pleasure of actually being part of the Fair Chance team now, but in one of my prior roles, I was, thanks, Martha. I was a superintendent with Toronto District School Board and had an opportunity to meet Michael and Jennifer from Taking It Global. And at the time, we had a proposal, an opportunity to really look at creating innovation across classroom spaces to provide online training for teachers. That was the model. The ministry had a proposal that was looking for digital transformation. So it was in collaboration with Taking It Global, the TDSB, and the ministry. And also we had a partnership there with Mars working with us as well. And so what came about through this, and Michael and Jennifer's enthusiasm and creativity actually remind me a lot of Dustin and Martha, the same kind of excitement and willingness to learn. We created a pilot that started with 30 schools, and we created this. It actually, you know, when you think about it today, it sounds a little more common than when 5-6 years ago, actually I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, when we were looking at creating online learning for teachers during the day while they were in classrooms during their this kind of asynchronous learning platform that was created to support teachers becoming really comfortable with tools and learning about social entrepreneurship. And at that time, we didn't even know what social entrepreneurship was. So we were pushing this whole notion of of social good, of students having social good projects that potentially could have a profit turning motive that would feed back into their projects. So kids are making dream catchers and selling them, or doing fundraisers to support homeless shelters, and not just selling the dream catchers or working in or raising money for food banks, but understanding poverty maybe through the understanding of food banks, or the 7 grandfather teachings through the understanding of making these dream catchers. But what was really exciting was the requirement from the ministry to have a research-based analysis around it. So with the TDSB research team, we were really looking to see if teachers' practice would shift, if they would become more comfortable with digital tools, if they would start incorporating them within their classrooms, if they were feeling confident to then lead with that kind of instruction across other different subject areas. And the project was over 3 years. It started with the 30 schools that I had the responsibility, being responsible for as superintendent. But by the end of 3 years, we had 175 teachers participating in this online platform that had these resident tutors, entrepreneurs in residence that Michael and Jennifer pulled together, and really this really high quality, rich, evidence-based learning environment for teachers. And what the teachers came back year after year, you know, teachers can choose, you know, they all of a sudden they get busy maybe the second year, you know, they participate 1 year, and then the second year, well, you know, I got something else to do. But they kept coming back. And so for me, that was always a testimonial, and they started inviting others. So what we saw is early adoption, maybe 1 or 2 teachers within one school. It started having 3 and 4 teachers across a grade panel or across the school. And this was both at the elementary and secondary levels. So this whole culture of innovation and this spirit of becoming a more competent and comfortable with using the digital tools and applying it not only to what began with a kind of a club focus or a social justice focus, but then started getting infused within core content, and teachers started aligning it with classroom expectations. And so it really was such a wonderful opportunity that began to scale across a number of different families of schools as well. And it kind of spread like wildfire as teachers got excited about participating. And every year we would call out for teachers to participate, and we actually had a wait list. Like it was okay, just a sec, we haven't made the call yet. We'll take down your name now, because it was such an innovative space where there was this real feeling of trust, where teachers could support one another in that environment of a really true innovative spirit. So it was a wonderful opportunity. And then I got an opportunity to work with in the special education department, and another superintendent took over the opportunity, and it continued. And so it was such a pleasure working with Jennifer and Michael. They're just always willing to pivot and learn and innovate, and there's a very much a work to a yes mentality there. That there was nothing that would stop this innovation, and so they really modeled that kind of willingness to learn that just cascaded across all of the educators and into the classrooms. So that's just a brief summary of that opportunity I had. It was such a pleasure. the ministry also started reaching back to us to make presentations across the province, because it was really a true partnership across the district that had this really rigorous evidence-based outcomes that teachers had to do pre and post year over year. So thank you for the opportunity to share.
Oh, I don't hear, wait a second. Okay.
I said clearly it made an impact with the work that you were doing. That came across. So I think that, you know, what can we do for our students? You have this amazing program at home now that you're trying to invite students to participate in home. But, you know, the collective on this call, what would you like to see from school districts who are taking a lead in terms of agency, going back to that word, and epistemology? If we could do some blue sky thinking, what would that look like? And that's open to the floor or the rooms.
I guess, you know, I mean, Jeff you made reference to it. You know, we've talked, we talk about student agency, and it's in our documents, it's in our ministry documents, it's all, you know, all through that. One of the challenges is a power and privilege, from my perspective, is a power and privilege issue. If we're saying that that's what we want for students, then principals have to have that for their teachers. Superintendents need to have that for their administrators and within the system, and the directors need to have that. And somehow that's a big challenge. Well, it is a big challenge because there's public pressure, there's, you know, political pressure and all that kind of you know, expectation that arises. I don't have any answers for that. I'm hoping that this crisis will afford some of the light of that to shine and be understood differently. I'm not, you know, so that's sort of my take on it. If we can flatten, never mind flattening the curve, if we can flatten the hierarchy and embed trust in students and trust our students, but if we can trust our colleagues, as Jeff's alluded to, and as Brenda has said as well, you know, then we'll have moved that much further, I think.
We talked about that during one of our wellness discussions, right? How the trust is one thing, and then also just like I had said about our son, feeling like you can contribute in a meaningful way, right? That the work you're doing actually matters. I think that the majority of people, I had a really good conversation with Andrew Campbell, and we were talking about intrinsic motivation versus, you know, my job is X. The reality is that you want to do a good job because you're motivated, but you also want to know that it's it's worthwhile, right? Like making sure that the decisions in the investment and the tireless efforts and the minds on constantly is directed towards something that it matters. I think that that's what we're trying to figure out, right? What matters right now? What matters? And the whole anti-standards side of the conversation, you have all of this like, oh, graduate expectations, assessment. Is that what matters? Or you know, how do we, the trust, the contributions, how do we communicate that from a leadership perspective? For sure. I don't know.
There's a beautiful post from our friend Gary Steger, and
I loved that blog post last week. He did.
Oh, he's been writing some very good stuff this past few weeks now. Yeah. And Audrey Waters also, although
she's amazing.
She's a little edgy. Well, Gary's a little edgy. We love the edge.
What she can capture in a tweet, though, I'm like, oh.
If you can share those in the chat, some of those links to plug in for those that aren't, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
She always makes me feel better about my day. Like, I'm like, if I'm having a shit day, I'm like, just go check out her last tweet and you'll be like,
Yeah, I decided not to actually repost her stuff today because I have a lot of schools and kids that follow me now, and sometimes I just can't post some of their stuff. But I'll share it here. I'll just go find it. But they were talking about, I mean, basically the bottom line was around the testing thing. I mean, really? Is that what we're worried about now? Kids cheating on tests? And then when we roll out this online space and these online environments, we're worried about them cheating. Maybe we should have some other ways of doing education. And Gary talks about trust and all the things that we're speaking about. So I'll go find those.
Yeah, I mean, his post was talking about like the humanistic, like how we have this opportunity, really have this opportunity to rethink our education and the priorities. And I had retweeted yesterday about if you are assessing, be aware you're assessing privilege.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah.
Yeah, because that is what it's about, because some of our students don't have the security. And Corinne, who's on the call, talked about, Maslow's versus Bloom's. And if you don't have Maslow's, you can't get into the thinking tools or learning experiences. So that's a reality. But then circling back to the students, if we could put their minds towards supporting their community, right? And getting people the security that they require in some shape or form, while considering their own well-being and mental health, obviously. I think that we could see this as a way to engage in innovation and optimistic thinking to make a contribution in a positive way for our communities. You talked about the Whose Land Anyways, if you could put that link in the chat, because Megan will do a blog about this and be able to share the resources to meet a wider audience. But what I loved with the Taking It Global was the Canada 150 app. Did you ever?
Yes, that was great too. Yeah.
So fun. It may have been the original Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
That's how I felt, running all around the city of Toronto, collecting points and finding, the geo points of the historical parts of the buildings. It was such a fun, we had such a fun couple of months running around with that app. So I think it's still up and running. It's Canada 150, and I'll put that in the chat window so we can share it out too, because as we're getting outside, it's a neat way to interact with your community and what's, the history that's here to celebrate.
Hey Martha, I'm gonna jump in for a second here. When we go to Winnipeg into the bigger areas, we can definitely tap into Pokemon Go and everything, but there are very few places around here where our students can actually do that. And that kind of brings us back to that whole access and equity that we talked about before, right? So it's it's definitely something that we need to remember and consider. And I think when you talked about building community, that's so true, about how we can support our students and just help build that community to support their learning. So that's just my 2 cents for this morning.
Thanks, Kim.
And, I was listening to a recording. Alana King is one of our educators at Upper Grand, so she was in on it. They had invited Gary, so I think he's going to be in on it. But I think it's called Rethink School or something. They were just doing a collection of people were online yesterday or whenever. It was their first session. And, Alana was sharing how some of the district decisions around some of the tools. So, many of us would just say to ourselves, hey, we're going to grab the video and we will just have our usual live classroom experiences. And they were reflecting on, when you're in a student's home space and what does that look like? And, it's related to the trust issue, but, what if there's something that goes on there and if the children aren't safe there, and then what do we do with that as educators who aren't here with them? And you know, there, she just brought up some really good points around how do we do this in the safest way for all of our kids, and you know, just lots to think about. It's complicated, right? So that gave me some things to reflect on last night.
So what happened to STEM and STEAM? Where did it go? It's fallen off. And I'm kind of being provocative in a sense, because it fell off in the 80s. Happened in the 80s, then government changed, the web came along, fell away. See? So I'm curious about the motivations of people who come into, let's say, coding and computational thinking. Because the reasons I got into it, Brenda got into it, many of us got into it in the earlier days, were many of the things that we're talking about here, maybe not in as broad a scope in terms of social, in terms of service learning and those kinds of things, but certainly in terms of the kinds of human beings that we're looking to develop. That's why Seymour was into it. You know, Seymour was a partner with Jean Piaget. He worked with Jean Piaget Piaget invited him to his lab in Geneva for five or 7 years. Seymour was a South African apartheid fighter and left South Africa. So he came with this heart and soul, and then developed this programming language for children that would help children become mathematicians, better human beings, better thinkers, collaborative, construct together, all that kind of stuff. These are the reasons that many of us got into the coding. So, you know, we've been questioning, Brenda and I have been questioning, like, why are we pushing code to learn at home with the coding and that kind of thing in this era, at this time, with this crisis? And we keep coming back to the issues of, yes, we need to do some other stuff, but we also need to remember our roots in this and why it's important for young people. It's not just about, you know, learning to code. It's about all these, this cultural surround and the empowerment and the broader thinking. Computational thinking, you know, the term annoys me, quite frankly. And it annoys me because it has become the holy grail. And, you know, Seymour again invented that term. It wasn't, you know, Jeanette Wing's invention in 2007. It came out like a lot earlier. And so when I computational thinking, he loved computational thinking, but he loved it more as something that could be thought about by kids as a form of thinking. A form of thinking that kids could put it in their repertoire along with other kinds of thinking. And so when these kids then were in the world looking to solve social issues of some kind, they could choose different kinds of thinking because they could see them as objects with which to think. So this was a beautiful perspective. This is why I'm still at it at my ancient age here. It's just, you know, it's just something we need to bring alive again and not lose it. So when kids are constructing stuff in maker environments or wherever, we need to keep zooming out and helping kids, you know, helping kids think about having maybe a video camera up here, watching them think and being, you know, having thinking as a highly valued activity, as Scardamelia and Brighter would have said, right? That's my rant.
I like it. Yeah, I think that the creation, the innovation that we're looking for, it doesn't just turn on. It's just not a switch that we can turn to our students and say, here you go, now be innovative. They need the experience with the tools. They need the opportunity to develop their thinking. They need the guidance and the facilitation. And so if that's not happening in the physical space, how does it translate into the virtual experiences as well? But here we are in this reality, and our students, the curiosity that's naturally unfolds in a situation where you give opportunities like the Code to Learn experiences, right? We had our son was on a microbit webinar, and so he's gone ahead and made a magic 8-ball with the microbit, and now he's gone to teach his cousins online how to do that as well, and talked about the different types of questions they can ask and how they can input different symbols to represent different you know, answers, I guess, responses. But they are naturally curious. We need to look at the ways we can support them, but also educators to say this is okay. Like, and I thought the way you started it with VUCA, you know, we don't have the answers. We're in this environment where the path is not clear. Nobody is the expert. We can lean on best practices or successful practices of the past, but we are in this together, and it's going to take the parent engagement, the students, the teachers, the admin, the you know, human resources, the mental health associations to consider this, and we are all considering education in a way that we haven't had the opportunity to do before.
And you know what I'm hearing from my friends in the field, principals and teachers, and that is they need to feel supported to make some mistakes.
Yes.
Because like Jeff alluded to, the wonderful, amazing, you know, walking the talk model that Jennifer and Michael are with Taking It Global, they are the epitome of what design and implementation looks like innovation looks like. You prototype, you rapidly bring things out, stuff that doesn't work falls away, and the stuff that works rises to the top, and you keep going, and nobody, you know, cares if the stuff falls away. Mistakes are part of the learning and creation process. So I hope that districts are really thinking about that too, and how do we support people to tell their stories and say, you know, be you know, willing to say, oh, this didn't work, but this did work. And so many of us have advantages because we know, you know, like that whole thing about the whole video conversation from last night for me, where they were worried about what might be happening in his child's room or whatever, at house, or, you know, well, many of us know about moderating digital spaces. We know about how to make it safe. We know about the digital citizenship piece you need to do first. And so how do we share our, you know, that our experience with people who are new? Because man, if I was new to these tools and this was the current situation, whoa, scary.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to stop though this conversation, just with the you know, make mistakes, and in hindsight, nobody's going to remember. Like, they'll remember the bruises, the cuts, but in reality, it's that will fall away, and what is working will come to the top, and we continue to build on that. I think that mindset will be my manifestation for today. Just let shit roll, right?
Yeah.
Let it roll, let it continue to try it out, and we'll figure out the right way forward. And all of the failures are learning opportunities. I set off the alarm with that thought.
Oh my gosh.
For that.